Now, in a GB News exclusive, a campaigner has revealed how he's been blocked from accessing court transcripts from the grooming gang trials.
Well, we can reveal that a judge from Bradford Crown Court has ruled that it would not be in the public interest to release information.
Well, joining us now is Adam Wren, who runs the Open Justice UK campaign. Adam, thanks so much for joining us on Saturday Morning Live today. Why are you campaigning to have these transcripts released?
So I'm from the area where these crimes happened. It's something I've always cared about. And in January, when this all kicked off again, I was reading the transcripts that were released along with everybody else, and I realised that a lot of them were not made public. And I realised one of the reasons they weren't made public is because they're so expensive to obtain. There was a case in Hansard where one of the girls tried to obtain the transcripts and she was quoted like £7,000. And I realised, well, we can crowdfund the money for this. We can raise it so that people can access them, so the victims can access them. We raised £100,000, I think, in a week, an incredible amount of money. I was feeling very, very positive at the outset of the campaign. So we set out immediately to work, and I put countless hours into this since. We've mapped something like 450 different defendants across 90 trials. And we, unfortunately, have been blocked from a few cases, including the Old Bailey. But by far the most explosive, in my mind, the most egregious, was this one from Bradford. It was really ridiculous.
This is a trial from Keighley in 2016, and this judge, Mr. Justice Rose, has told you that it's not in the public interest for this information to be released. What can you tell us more about your application and the rejection? Right,
so we submitted an application saying essentially that we think this information needs to be public because it's never been public before, and that we would take all there's considerations that need to be made. There's Section 1 of the Sexual Offences Act 1992, all about protecting victims.
Privacy and the
Right. And I've sought legal advice, so our application incorporated this. I've had lawyers look at it and draft it with me, and it was rejected on the grounds of public interest. Now, my opinion here is, so we've acquired 11 sentencing remarks so far, and we have 20 awaiting delivery to us that we've had accepted. And of those 11 that we've acquired, I've given a bunch to MPs and investigative journalists and other people while we can't quite release them yet because the judges need to go through and redact and such. One of the people that acquired them was Katie Lem, who used those transcripts to make that incredible speech that she gave last week in the House of Commons. And Jess Phillips's response was that this information, we don't need the National Inquiry because this information is already public. However, some of the information that Katie raised in the Commons was from these transcripts. It's not been public before. So the idea that not getting them is not that it somehow harms the public interest when this information isn't available and has been raised in the Commons is, I think, ridiculous. It's ridiculous on its face.
Do you think there's a sense amongst politicians, and maybe some in the media as well, that some of these details are frankly just so harrowing, so grotesque, that it would be just easier not to know? They think, well, we know what the grooming gangs are now, we know it's appalling, we're hoping for an inquiry whether or not we get one, but actually just the details are just too difficult. Do you think that kind of deep human reason actually is underneath this denial of wanting to know?
I think I can't speak to the reasoning behind everybody in the party that's blocking this. And I know that behind closed doors there are many Labour MPs, some of them quite vocal, that have been in support of a national inquiry. I don't know why the decision makers haven't gone for it. I think it's a mistake on their part. I think they're hoping that it will go away. I don't think this is going away. And I think 4 years from now, when we have another election, this issue will be front and centre. And I think these politicians are going to have to stand up on the debate stage and they're going to have to defend their record in front of the public. And they're going to have to, unfortunately, face the people and admit that they refused an investigation into what I think are some of the most horrific crimes that have ever been committed in the 2,000-year history of this nation.
Adam, that 2016 trial, the details you're trying to release, the abusers, 12 of them were jailed for assaulting a girl as young as 13. Crimes described as terrible and heartless. But there's limited information about the failures potentially associated with attempts to deal with this problem at the time, because they were receiving justice about a decade after the event. What other information did you get in that rejection which you think is troubling or points towards censoring that information coming to light?
So it's not just this rejection. We've had another rejection from the Old Bailey, where we have a whole email chain where they stated that they believe that it was a CSE case and therefore they have to review it. And then the third email that they sent back to us said, we've just realised that it's CSE and therefore we're not releasing it. But they knew that in the first place.
But for Bradford, they said it was not appropriate to release it. Can you give us more detail from that rejection specifically?
So the only information that we really have from that rejection is that they believe that the debate, given the debate that's happening in the public sphere, that releasing more information is not in the public interest.
So that's judges trying to control the debate we're having in public, it seems to me.
Right. And one of the issues that's been raised again with these gangs is that the reason that this was allowed to happen is because the authorities were turning a blind eye. They didn't want this debate to happen. They feared it would embolden the far right. This culture, we're told, has gone. It's evaporated and they're taking the issue seriously.
And of course, at the time, anybody, any member of the public or journalist would have been able to sit in court and hear the trials. But of course, at that time, it was not widely understood how these cases were connected, how widespread it was, the scale of the crimes. So it's even more important now, isn't it, to be able to tie all these things together?
Right, and there's also a lot that just hasn't. Much of this has been reported by local media, but there's a lot that hasn't. I've spoken with a few victims and their families, and they're very supportive when I say that my focus with the transcripts especially, the one thing that they really reveal are the failings of the police, the failings of the local authorities and the prosecution. There's one transcript that we have where a girl went to the police and to report her abuser. She left and her abuser sent her a message saying, I know that you were with the police because I've paid off somebody in CID and I know that you're planning to go to a refuge, and she ended up pulling out. She ended up refusing their help.
Yeah. That information is already in the public domain with regards to, that's a Rotherham case, I believe, but there'll be so many more that is yet to be released because the details weren't captured back in the time. So, Adam, thank you so much for